Hi everyone, how you doing? Have you had a good day today? I bet you've all been really good. The weather's been a bit rubbish today. It's been a bit rainy and miserly, but anyway, managed to get out. Um, yeah. So Nana today, as promised, I was going to read you Puss in Boots. So if you're sitting comfortably, then Nana will begin. Make sure we're turned up. There we go. Once upon a time, there was a miller who, when about to die, called his 3 sons to him. I have nothing much to leave you, he said, but what I have is yours. You, eldest son, shall have my mill. You, second son, shall have my donkey. But alas, third son, all I can leave you is my cat. The miller died, and the eldest son took the mill. He allowed the second son to live there in return for the use of the donkey. But as for you, he said to the youngest son, you must go and look after yourself. Your cat is no use to me. So the miller's youngest son sadly went out of his old home with the cat following him. He went to a shed and put all his belongings there. Then he looked at the cat and shook his head. Whatever can I do with you, Puss, he said. You're no use to me, and I can't even feed you. Cheer up, master, said the cat. If you can find me a bag and a pair of boots, I'll show you that you've nothing to be sad about. The miller's son stared at the cat in surprise. Good gracious, he thought. Never did I hear a cat speak before. This must be a truly wonderful creature who, perhaps, will be able to do wonderful things. He went straight away to get him a bag and a pair of boots. Puss was very pleased with them. He proudly put on his big boots and hung the bag over his back, and then he ran into the garden and plucked a fine fat lettuce, which he tucked into the bag. The miller's son watched him in amazement. He saw him stride across the field and then lost sight of him. Puss soon came back to a rabbit hole. Puss soon came to a rabbit hole. He lay down near as if he were dead, leaving the mouth of his bag open with the fine green lettuce peeping out. Soon a rabbit came out of his hole. He smelt the lettuce and trotted over to it. Only a dead cat near, he thought. He put his head into the bag for a good nibble at the lettuce leaves. Quick as a flash, Puss pulled the string of the bag and the rabbit's head was caught. Puss pushed him right into the bag, slung it over his back and marched off. Very soon he arrived at the king's palace. I wish to see the king, he said to the astonished guard. He was taken to where the king sat on his throne. Puss bowed very low and held the bag out to the king. Pray, your majesty, will you kindly accept this fine rabbit as a gift from my master, the Marquis of Carabas, he said. The king was not surprised to see the cat could speak. Go back to your master, he said, taking the bag, and give him my thanks for his kind gift. Puss grinned and ran off. 2 days later he caught 2 plump partridges and put them in a bag. Off he went to the king and stood bowing before the throne. Pray accept these plump birds as a gift from my master, the Marquis of Carabas, he said. The king was delighted to see the marvellous speaking cat again and accepted the gift. Then he told Puss to go to the kitchen and have a good meal, which the cat was pleased to do. Now before very long Puss heard that the king was going out driving with his beautiful daughter and would pass by the riverside. An idea came into his head and he ran off to his master, the miller's son. Master, he cried, will you trust me and obey me if I ask you to do something strange? If you do, it may be your fortune is made. Tell me what it is, said the miller's son. It is only this, master mine. Go to the river and swim in the place I show you. If anyone speaks to you, pretend you are the Marquis of Carabas. The miller's son stared at the cat in astonishment, but because he knew Puss was very clever, he said that he would do what he wanted him to do, and off he went with the Puss to the river, undressed, and began to swim. Just as he was swimming, the king and his daughter and all the court were driving by. As they passed, they heard a loud shout. Help! Help! Oh, help! Help! My lord, the Marquis of Carabas is drowning! Everyone stopped at once and looked around. Neither the king nor his court could see anyone but Puss in Boots, who beckoned them anxiously. Go and see if you can help, the king called to his nobles. Off they all went and helped drag the miller's son out of the river. Meanwhile, Puss ran up to the king's carriage. Your Majesty, he cried, whatever can my poor master do? A thief has stolen all his clothes and he cannot pay his respects to you, for he has nothing to put on but a bathing suit. Dear, dear, said the king, who by now was quite curious to see this Marquis of Carabas, "I will send one of my servants to the palace, and he shall bring back a suit of my own clothes." So a very smart suit was fetched, and the miller's son dressed himself. As he was tall and handsome, he looked very fine indeed, and Puss was pleased with him. The king was delighted to see the man who he thought had sent him such fine rabbits and partridges, and made him welcome. "Come in for a drive, Marquis," he said, and the miller's son got into the carriage. Puss went on ahead of the carriage with another plan in his head. Soon he came to the field where the mowers were cutting grass. "Hey!" he called to them in a fierce voice. "When the king comes by and asks who those fields are, say they belong to the Marquis of Carabas. If you don't, I'll have your heads cut off." The mowers shook in their shoes to hear a cat talking, and when the king came up and asked who the fields they were cutting, they answered that what the cat had told them. "They are the fields of the Marquis of Carabas, your majesty." The king looked at the miller's son and said, "What fine fields you have, Marquis." While this was happening, Puss ran into the cornfield in which were men reaping corn. "Hey!" he called fiercely. "When the king comes by and asks you whose fields these are, say they belong to the Marquis of Carabas. If you don't, I'll have you made into mincemeat." The poor reapers shivered and shook. The king soon came by and asked whose cornfields they were cutting. "They are the cornfields of the Marquis of Carabas, your majesty," they answered. "What fine cornfields you have," said the king, turning to the miller's son, and thinking that a rich man he must be. "In fact," thought the king, "he would make a fine husband for my daughter." Now all these fields really belonged to the wicked wizard who lived in the castle not very far off. Puss ran to it and knocked on the door. The wizard opened it. "Good day, sire," said the Puss, bowing very low. "On my travels I've heard how wonderful you are, so I have come to see you." "Then pray come in," said the wizard, very pleased indeed. Puss went in and they began to talk. "Is it true," said Puss, "that you can change yourself into any animal you wish?" "Quite true," said the wizard, and changed himself suddenly into an enormous lion to show Puss how clever he was. The cat was so frightened and astonished that he ran up the window curtains to the very top and stayed there until the wizard changed back into his own shape again, and then Puss jumped back down. "Sire," he cried, "you are wonderful. Can you be clever enough to change yourself into a little animal? That must be even more difficult than turning into a big one." "Not at all," said the wizard, delighted to show off his cleverness. "Look here." In a second he changed himself into a tiny brown mouse and ran over the floor to Puss. Aha! That was exactly what the clever cat wanted. He pounced on the mouse and gobbled him up. "Not much of a meal," said Puss, licking his lips, "but that makes an end to the wicked wizard anyhow. Now the castle can belong to my dear master." Oh, pretty clever, this cat, isn't he? Just at that moment, up drove the king with his court, and the cat ran out of the gate to lead them to the castle. "Welcome, welcome," he cried. "3 times welcome to the castle of the great Marquis of Carabas." The king gazed at the splendid castle and then turned to the miller's son in surprise. "What a fine castle," he said. I have not such a grand one in the whole of my kingdom." The miller's son said nothing. Indeed, he was so surprised at everything that he really didn't know what to say. When the company entered the castle, they found a feast waiting for them. The wicked wizard had really prepared it for his friends, but they, seeing the king arrive, did not dare enter. The king feasted well and felt more and more pleased with the miller's son. At last he turned to him and said, "Marquis, I'd like you more and more. I have never met a man whom I would like so much as for my daughter's husband. Let me make you a prince, and then, if you will marry my lovely princess." Now the prince and princess had plenty to say to each other in the carriage, and they had fallen in love at once, so they were delighted to hear the king's speech. "But, dear love," whispered the miller's son to the princess, "I am really only a miller's son, and I owe all this to my clever cat, Puss in Boots." "What does that matter to me?" smiled the princess. "It is enough that I love you." So with great rejoicing and feasting, the miller's son and the princess were married, and went to live in the castle that used to belong to the wicked wizard. As for Puss in Boots, he waited on them both faithfully, and was as proud as he could be of the lovely bride he had won for his master. Oh, what a lovely story! I didn't know that's what happened in Puss in Boots. Anyway, I enjoyed that. I hope you did too. And I hope you sleep well, and I love you loads. And I will see you again tomorrow. And tomorrow's story is the story of Rumpelstiltskin. So I look forward to that. So night night Ruby, I love you. Night night Max, I love you. Night night Atty, I love you. And night night Tori Tumble, I love you too. And I'll see you all tomorrow. You be really, really good. Love you loads. Bye.